Looking round church this morning, I imagine that most of us here can remember December the 31st, 1999. Yeah? Do you remember all the hype that was going on as we moved into the year 2000 and the third millennium? Lots of people were saying that computers were going to collapse, fail dramatically, because they couldn't do the transition from the 1900s to the 2000s. Civilization was going to collapse. People would take to the streets, fighting, looting. Needless to say, it didn't happen. The clocks ticked on, and they still do. It was much the same in the years immediately after the resurrection. The first generations of Christians expected the world to end during their lifetime and Christ to come again. They took quite literally his words about returning in power and glory to judge the world. Let's recall, they themselves had heard him say these words, and the turmoil all around them in the political world led them to believe that the end was nigh. Jesus was coming soon. They would be saved, exalted, rewarded. And that's the thinking we encountered in that first reading of Mass today. St. Paul was addressing a particular anxiety that existed in the first century among the followers of Jesus. If everything was geared towards meeting the Lord when he came again in glory, then what about the people who had missed out on this triumphant moment because they had died? And St. Paul uses the traditional language and symbolism of the last trumpet sounding. He emphasizes that those who have died as Christians will be the first to rise, and then those of us who are still alive will be taken up into heaven. There will be no advantage or disadvantage to being alive or dead at the second coming of Christ. Trumpets sounding, the voice of the archangel, the vision of Christ coming in glory surrounded by the angels. A cosmic vision, and one that was intended to thrill, perhaps even to shock, although there must have been an element of fear at the thoughts of facing judgment. It's interesting to note that St. Paul says, with such thoughts as these, you should comfort one another. How do you view the second coming of Christ? Do you ever think about it? We do need to cultivate in our own lives a respectful but reasonably cheerful attitude towards the coming of Christ. That psalm today created a powerful image of the world rejoicing to welcome God's judgment. Let the land and all it bears rejoice. All the trees of the wood shout for joy at the presence of the Lord, for he comes to rule the earth. And the reason for this joy is the fact that once the Lord has arrived, with justice he will rule the world. He will judge the peoples with his truth. I sometimes hear people say that they're not frightened of death, but that they do fear the process of dying. We need to develop a positive attitude to both the prospect of our death and our judgment, whether these happen before the end of the world or at the end of the world, to try to approach both with a spirit of joy at the fulfillment of God's purpose. And let's never ever forget, God has a purpose. We heard it in the Gospel today. He sent me to bring the good news to the poor, to proclaim liberty to captives and to the blind new sight, to set the downtrodden free, to proclaim the Lord's year of favour. Jesus shows us the divine authority and inspiration of his teaching, and it's on that teaching that we await the blessed hope and the coming of our Saviour, Jesus Christ, at the end of time. So, here and now, in this life, in this world, he gives us the reassurance of his presence and glimpses of his glory, and he teaches us to expect even greater things when he returns.